Well, good morning, everyone. It's a gorgeous day out. I have to say, every other time I've come to wow, this thing's really tall and I'm really short. I've always come to speak to the League of Women Voters, and it's always been raining outside, and during the drought, that was a great thing. And now that we're in the wettest drought on record, it's sunny outside, so this is always fortuitous to come and talk to everyone. The first thing I want to let everybody know, and this is kind of a reoccurring piece of information or a question that comes to me, is that Nevada Irrigation District is a public entity. It is a branch of the state government through legislation. So we are a public trust organization. Okay, so we're not a private organization, we're not a semi-private organization, we're a public trust organization. So let us begin. Now, the other preface I have this morning is a number of you in this room have seen my presentations already. This is a change on those presentations, because what I did was I took essentially the 3 questions posed by League of Women Voters and then recrafted the presentation so that I could address the 3 questions tendered today. So those questions are: why the reservoir has been proposed, where does it fit in the need for our community, and then why are people opposed to it? So I reshaped those a little bit, but that's essentially the 3 talking points that I'll go through today. So to begin, okay, so why is the reservoir proposed? And so I'm going to start this a little bit with some education, and that is any water district has 4 sources of water. Okay, and so here we have a local source, an import source, a recycled source, and a conserved source. Okay, out of these sources, NID has access only to a very few of them. So on the local side, surface water is our only water input to the district, okay? Because we're a system designed to operate on snowpack, okay? For 95 years, that's how we've worked. Groundwater, there isn't an appreciable groundwater basin within the district's boundary. There is a little bit of the North American subbasin down around Lincoln, but it isn't usable for the way the district is set up at this point. Import, there is no other water agency or water area that we can import water from. So if you were in the LA basin and you were San Gabriel Valley and you needed more water, you could call Azusa and say, hey Azusa, you guys have extra water, we need extra water, can you send it our way? We don't have that ability. We can do some sharing with PCWA, but for the most part, we don't really have a way to import water to the district. Recycled water, NID utilizes 100% of all of the wastewater stream that is coming out of the wastewater facilities within Grass Valley and Nevada City, and some down in Auburn before it gets sent out to the regional plant. So that's 100% utilized at this point, and then conserved. And for those of you that are NID customers in here, I want to congratulate you. Over the last few years, and most specifically last year, you all have conserved 26% over 2013. That's fantastic. You know, that's yeoman work, and I can't applaud you more. So NID's mission clearly is to bring quality water sustainably and to protect the resources in our care. So to begin, the impacts to water supply. So why is the reservoir needed? Clearly, the driver that started the investigation that is bringing the proposed project forward is climate variability. I use variability because other words tend to freak people out, and then we'll have an hour conversation on the why and the how and all of that stuff. But the predominance of what we have is a shift from a snow-driven system to a water-driven system. And that's a big impact for an organization that has, for 95 years, run a system based on its largest reservoir, which is its snowpack. The next one that's driving this, and these are expanding right now, are delta demands. So as many of you know, if you read the Sacramento Bee or you watch any news outlet or you've been following the Delta for, God, I don't know, it's my entire career, delta demands are and will be in the future a continual issue. And trying to solve those demands for the environment, for those utilities that are utilizing the Delta as a conveyance facility, are going to be, over the next few years, a real anvil on which we test the water rights of the state. Now, one of the things that's happening is that the Delta fix right now, phase 1, has a report that is indicating that there will be a desire, or there is a desire, to leave 35 to 75% of unimpaired flow in the streamway, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then water rights modifications. So a few years ago, there was legislation to create policy around the human right to water. The human right to water is that everybody in the state of California has a right to a certain portion of water. And while that's a truth, it sets up a counterpoint to water rights. Water rights are a propertied right. And so if you take a propertied right, you have to give something in return. The human right to water, and I'll explain in a little bit, has to do with spreading that share, taking from those that have and giving to those that have not. And that is a very different way of looking at water rights in the state. So, to begin, climate. So NID started to respond to the climate variability issue. When I arrived at the district, there was a question, and the question was, Rem, how come we deal with earthquakes as engineers? We plan for an earthquake. We know that there will be one. We don't know when it's going to be. We don't know how strong it's going to be. But all of the work that we do as engineers is about preparing the system or the building for the eventuality of that earthquake. Why aren't we doing the same thing for climate change? And that resonated with me. You know, not only do we have the models that are saying this, but now being at NID, which has one of the oldest precipitation and snow records in the state of California, bar none, we're able to correlate the models that are coming out of these organizations with empirical data, even in a year like this, where we're having this kind of, well, we hear more intense snow and rain events. I mean, we have lost, I don't know, I'm guessing roughly 7 times the amount of water that Centennial will hold out of Rollins just in the first part of the season. But these organizations, NOAA, NASA, JPL, USGCPR, and UC Davis, are all combining or are all singing similar messages on these points. We will have, or we believe we'll have, 80% less snowpack. Okay, so for a system that's snowpack driven, having 80% less reservoir is a problem. Okay, so that means we got to shift to water. Shorter, more intense rain events. I haven't really seen that this year, but last year, weekend heavy rain, all week no water. Weekend heavy rain, all week no water. We're seeing those kind of events. So it's I don't, you know, do you want to be the one looking at the sky going, it's happening, it's happening, it's happening? But the empirical data is starting to show that it's happening. Mid-alpine max, upper alpine to suffer. While this year, you know, it's not that, right? Our snow measuring equipment just can't get to the dirt. It's so deep. But we know that when we get these big rain events like we've gotten this year, the snowpack in the upper is diminished, and we get a smaller, more grainy type of snow. And then the shift to the peak storage event. That's kind of key to our puzzle. NID runs its system in this way. When we start our irrigation season, we go on to liquid supply. So we go to the reservoirs and we call that water. We deliver that water to 474 miles of open ditch canal and siphon. So we pull that water out of the system. Then we wait for the snowpack to deliver the water into the system so that we can bridge into October. If the water comes earlier in the season, like it did in 2016, then the reservoirs are already full. And there is no snowpack to refill them. So we're onto the reservoirs, and then we lay on those reservoirs, or we draw from those reservoirs through that entire season period. And that depreciates our ability, or depletes our ability, to move into the next season, because as a water agency, we're not focused on this year. We're focused on next year. We already have our supply. I'm worried about 2018. That's what's keeping me up at night now. So we're full. And if I know that we have snowpack, then I know that we have carryover for 2018, and we can make other adjustments. If we don't have snow, like we had in 2015, everybody, our snowpack was 0. The single largest reservoir at NID had no water in it at all. That's particularly, well, that kept me up a lot. So anyway, then we have longer, more prolonged dry periods, and we're seeing that as part of, and I have a little brief graph of the Western drought, the Palmer Drought Severity Index. These events are coming more regular, they're becoming more intense, and they're coming for longer periods. And so we need to be looking for solutions that can move water in time. Okay? All right, so this is the Winter Palmer Drought Severity Index, and I would point out that, so starting in 1900, these droughts right here, they're not terribly long, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, but they're not very severe, and they always have these kind of peak events near them. The problem is that 2014 on this graph is the most severe drought in history, and 2015 was similar, so we're just stacking them up. And as a geeky engineer, I would point out that these lines are going down and they're becoming more intense, which completely correlates with the models that are saying these droughts are going to become more severe in time and they're going to last longer. So when we have these huge events where we have a lot of water coming into the system, we need to find a way to capture that water and commute that water in time from where it was delivered to where we as a society, as a community, need it. So this is the single dry year graph from our Urban Water Management Plan 2015. Now, there's a lot of numbers up here, so we're talking about water that we get from PG&E. I'm sorry, it's early and I'm a little nervous. Watershed runoff, carryover storage. So this is the amount of water that we want to carry from one season to the next so that we know that we can make our deliveries in the next year. Recycled water, that's every drop of water that we have available. So this is our supply total in a single dry year. So a 1 year drought event. We have our supply, we have our demand, leaving us in a single year dry event 23,000 acre feet of water. All right, is that a lot? Is it not a lot? It's not a lot of water, everybody. And that number is high. So at the request of the public, the district took its urban water management plan to a very conservative growth point, saying 3%, no more, no less. Right now, there's some debate in Placer County about whether or not that number is going to be 13% or whether that number is going to be 7%. So if we consider that number, that means that 23,000 actually goes down by 6,000. So that's really the bracket. So it's actually 17,000, meaning that this number right here, which is the one that gets my attention, means that this number goes under 10,000. That's the change in our pocket as a community when it comes to water. If I only have 10,000 acre feet, 10,000 acre feet is all of the water needed to supply our treated water customers in a single year. It's also, interestingly enough, all of the water that we deliver to the environment every year. So at that point, we're running around with change in our pocket going, hey man, this isn't groovy. We're going to start pulling people back. But then when we get to 2030, I'm negative. And on this graph, I'm negative in 2035. Negative means supply impact. And that's something we'll talk about in a minute. But that's the point NID's out of water. So we have to start thinking about how do we claw back. Just to get to this point, everybody, the loss of snowpack is not about expansion, it's about clawing back loss, right? Right now we're operating on a snowpack. If the snowpack doesn't exist, we have to go find that water to make that water available, okay? So these are the things that the district is watching. These are the things the district is responding to. So the other issues, so this is the Delta Phase 1 demand. So this is the demands for inflow. And the report says this: more natural timing, distribution, and variability of flows. A range of tributary inflows from 35% to 75% of unimpaired flows is analyzed. Now, what does that mean? Unimpaired flow is the natural water in a system. If in 100, let's say we have a creek that's 100% allocated, every drop of water in that creek is spoken for, whether it's environmental or urban industrial or agriculture. That means that we have to go back into that water rights package, rejigger who has what water, and make sure that we have either between 35 and 75% of that water available for the environment, okay? And it's not for the environment local, it's for the delta, okay? So the local environment's ancillary to the desires of the delta in this case. Oh, one of the things, so everybody, if you've ever heard of X2, okay, so this is a thing in space, right, where we talk about where's X2 in the delta, the point where salt water and fresh water meet, that point that we're going to try to hold. by delivering more and more fresh water into the system so that we can hold seawater out. It's actually right here at Collinsville, okay, at the 81 kilometer point. Okay. Now, so just an interesting aside, as climate variability or climate change happens, right, we're going to have higher sea level, which means we're going to have greater pressure from sea level rise, which means we have to put more and more and more fresh water into the delta to hold X2 in an artificial position. Just an aside. So we know on the Bear River, then from wet to critical, we go from about 501,000 acre feet to 109, which means that at 50%, we stand to lose 205,000 to, 55,000 acre feet out of the system should the state continue down this track and should the Delta plan become real. So we're actively working inside of this framework right now. NID is to try to make sure that we protect the watersheds that we operate within, and that's the Yubas, that's Deer Creek, Bear, and then all the foothill tributaries. All right, so water rights for the future. All right, so this is the third piece of the puzzle. So this is they're coming to get our water slide. CUA, California Urban Water Agencies, in their 2012 Water Supply Reliability Report, put forward this table. Now, for an irrigation district that's supplying agriculture predominantly, the band that is most important to us is this little tiny green one right here. So, okay, so that one was 6,000, and I love the line here. So this is ag efficiency transfer to urban. So what does that mean? That means we're taking from agriculture and we're giving it to the urban sector. In 2020, or is that 2030? 2030, they're transferring 398,000 acre feet from ag to urban. CUA is all of the urban areas from San Francisco down to Los Angeles. 76% of the state's population lives in that zone. So they're clearly identifying agriculture as their target. Okay, so then that gets us to California. California passed AB 685, which affirms the human right to water. We completely agree with that and we support it. But what it did do is it caused the State Water Board, through resolution in 2016, to start to consider rejiggering the water rights of the state. And that would go from property right to individual right, meaning the greater your population, the greater your right to water. So I don't know about you guys, but I know our population isn't growing as fast as Los Angeles and San Diego and all of that. So it starts to give the urbanized areas greater water right pressure in terms of taking water from those that have and bringing it to those that have not. And then lastly is the California Water Governance for the 21st Century. There are a number of groups that have identified the water rights system as not beneficial, and so are working on different ways to take water rights apart in the state, which will, for an organization such as ours, which has roughly 58 water rights, half of which are pre-14s, which I would say are sovereign, and we'll fight those to the death. But the other ones, the pre-14s, those are licenses, and they're as strong as the driver's license in your wallet. As soon as the state wants to take it, they'll take it. Now, it's a property right, so somebody has to compensate us, but it is a license. So, then the question is the project new? And the answer to those that have seen this before, no. We have been proposing this project, or this project has been in the queue since 1927 when we first conceived of it as part of our storage apparatus. So our then Frederick Tibbetts, our chief engineer, identified the Parker Ranch site as the highest best storage opportunity for the district, period. And like a good bureaucratic organization, we built every other reservoir in the report except for that one. So we're taking care of it now. We looked at it in 41, we gave it to the Corps, they decided not to move the project forward. We looked at it again in 53 because we were out of water, everybody. And we found that the economics of the fruit crop in Colfax, the stone fruit crop, just wasn't strong enough to carry the project. So we worked with PG&E and we developed the Yuba Bear project, which developed 160,000 acre feet, and it's 82.2 megawatts or 83 megawatts. That water is being used to protect not only this community, but also the environment around it. And then in 83, then Jim Chatney, my predecessor, started to look at the site. We did some geotechnical investigations, and then they backed away from it. So where does this fit into the needs of our community? Okay, so there's some big ideas on this one. So drought versus climate change. So they're different. Okay, so climate change is a permanent change in how we're doing business. Drought is an intermittent thing, something we have to get through in a season. And so what I wanted to point out here is really the difference between a temporary impact and a permanent impact. A temporary impact is something that we use conservation to get us through. A permanent impact is when we start to go back to our supply framework and we start to apply a water rights overlay, meaning those that are senior get water before those that are junior. Climate change, everybody, is a permanent supply impact. Okay, we're saying that the way the system works will not work that way anymore. So we're starting to watch that. Our goal at NID is to maintain the status quo, right? We're trying to hold the line where we are right now, and what that means is we need to protect agriculture, we need to protect urban, and we need to protect the environment. So, on that, there are some beliefs that NID is pursuing this project as the panacea, as the only thing that will solve our problem, and that's categorically untrue. And this is one of those points where our two organizations agree, right? I mean, conservation activities, those are very important. And as I mentioned to you guys, 26% over last year, or over 2013. We have a strong conservation program. We've worked on both the ag side and the urban side to realize those savings. Canal lining and piping, that's an issue with us because there is leak loss, and we want to track that down, and we want to start to pull that water back into the system. One of the things to understand, though, is we pull the water back in those systems, the environment that has grown up around those systems is being damaged. Sediment removal, we are engaged in both Combi and in Rollins to remove the sediments that's in there. Sorry, it's removal. We're working. We're trying. And then, so a couple of things there. NID has invested considerable time and effort in those. We're the only one in the world that owns the machine that can clean out Combi and remove mercury from our sediment so that we have clean materials so that we can move that class 3 contaminant out of the system. And we've been working with Secretary Laird over the last couple months to ensure that we've got roughly, we have a BCP right now, a budgetary change proposal, for $6 million to go in and start working on Combi so that we can develop the technology to spin that off, so that we can give it to folks at Clear Lake, we can give it to people at Lake Berryessa, so that we can hand it out to all the other Sierra communities that have this legacy mining issue in it. Watershed management. NID is one of the only organizations that actually has a dedicated funding source. We have a department. We're working in our watersheds right now. We're at Scotts Flat. We're working in English Meadow. We're doing the business, you know. So it isn't just we're talking out of one side. We have it funded. We have a $2.1 million account. We're getting grants for this work. We're doing it. And then system reoperation and cross connection with our regional partners. Everybody, we can't go it alone, right? We can't row the boat by ourselves, otherwise it goes in a circle if we only have one oar. It's very, very important that NID reach out to its local partner, its local other agencies, meaning Placer County Water Agency, meaning Lincoln, meaning Camp Far West Irrigation District, meaning South Sutter, so that we can protect ourselves in the future as these changes are going to affect all of us together as a community. So, this is our service area. So 287,000 acres. We are the second largest irrigation district in the state of California geographically. We essentially operate from English Mountain, which is, you know, way up over there somewhere, down into the system. What you see here is our operational area. You can see the blue lines are our water systems. We have 7 different water systems. Now we have 6 because we just shut down Cascade Shores. Yay! All the green lines are our irrigation system, and I would point out, if you can see it, the light green that follows each one of these lines. These are the veins of improvement that come from bringing water to the land. That's it, you guys. And then some of these yellow boxes, those are boxes that are, those folks are not within the district, they're within the boundary, but not within the district. So, this is what we are. So our approximate service area is 28,500 services with an estimated population of about 80 to 90,000 people. We also serve Nevada City at about 3,100 people, and Grass Valley at roughly 13,000. We also, our local systems and ecosystems are operating, we're operating in the Middle Yuba, Canyon Creek, South Yuba, Deer Creek, Bear River, the foothill tributaries, as well as the Spenceville Reserve. So we have water to all of these, we're providing water to all of these, and we're working with our regional partners, as I've already mentioned, Placer County, South Sutter, and Camp Far. So it's not just this little microcosm, that we're in, this 287,000 acres. We're operating much on a larger scale so that we can all get through this change together. So, as a region, how much on ag? How does it impact us? In Nevada County in 2014, it was 23 million. In 2015, it was 22 million. In Placer, it was 74 million in 2014 and 58 million. So roughly 80 to 90 million dollars annually is the revenue from the agriculture that NID backstops in its operations. Not shabby. You know, it's not the $1 billion worth of almonds coming out of the Central Valley, but our ag it's smaller, it's more unique, it is more vulnerable, right? We don't have the economies of scale that others do. The other part here is this does not reflect our burgeoning agricultural economy that will change. I would anticipate it changes these numbers a lot. The other thing that's interesting that's happening is that the Placer County rice is changing to orchards. So in 2016, Placer County had 700 acres convert from rice to orchards. That's roughly $20,000 an acre is what Mr. Hunsinger told me. So roughly last year, there was a $14 million investment in orchards in Placer County. Now, that's really different from livestock. Livestock, you can winnow your herd, you can expand your herd, you can moderate. Rice, you can decide to plant or not. When you put in young saplings, the first 5 years, you're not really in production, but you need a lot of water to get that stuff up and running. So the cropping that we're doing, the change in cropping, requires more protection in terms of how NID operates, not less. So we're trying to be careful and sensitive to those guys as well. So that brings us to why is there opposition? So I picked roughly 5 points. There are others, but these seem to be the ones, these are the points du jour. So right now, what's on the community's mind? So this was done as part of so what you're seeing is a word cloud. These are the respondents in a survey to talk about Centennial. And clearly water and drought and community and jobs are the kind of the big ticket issues that our community is looking at. A lot of these, well, I would say the top 3 are NID and have NID involved in them. This survey of almost 900 of the folks within our service area resulted in an 83.7% in favor of the proposed reservoir project. So opposition, yes, but not in the magnitude that some would like to believe. So financial. So first thing is unlike many of my compatriots with organizations, NID is in a very strong debt position right now. We have roughly $20 million in debt compared to San Juan Irrigation, which I believe is running right around $350 million. We have sufficient reserves right now to quash that debt should the board choose to at any point. And then the other part of this is that we have started our process. Doing financial feasibility is it's a very difficult and detailed art form. So we're in the process of running out to consultants to start this process, and the board will have its full financial feasibility at the same time that it moves forward on its EIR. But we're just starting that process now. So there are 2 questions that have come out of financial feasibility. One is, how do we finance the project? And the other one is, how do we pay for the project? So financing the project, we have the ability to go to Prop 1 funds, and I'm proud to say that we're number 1 on the list right now, everybody. Sites is following us. And so that money is tax money that everybody in this room is already putting in. So we might as well bring some of that tax money to us. Bonds, we have the ability to bond. We have the financing authority already. We won't need to go out to the public to ask for that bond. State and federal grants, there are a number of grants that are available to the district, and wherever you land on the current administration, I'm whatever. I got no bearings on that one. But if $1 trillion becomes available, we want to make sure that some of that money comes our way. And so we'll be active in that environment. SRF, there are some that believe we can't, there are some that believe we can. This is a state revolving loan fund. You can go into this fund, draw money out of it. The percentage points are about 2%. We're relatively confident that we can go there. And then private financing. We actually have had a number of folks come to the district and offer to fund some or all of the project. Not to control the project, but just to get interest out of it. There are a number of very large equity firms and engineering firms that have to hold their insurance money safe. Oh, I've just gotten this. So how do we pay for it? Pay for it with hydroelectric revenue, and I put this in order. So then you'll have hydroelectric revenue, you'll have recreation revenue, and I want to focus on this part. Existing property taxes. NID is not looking to increase property taxes. We already have an existing property tax base. That's where we would go to fund some of this, and then finally we would backstop with water rates. Okay, so dam, there is a dam. There are people that hate dams. There's nothing I can do about that part. Loss of habitat, we'd be converting a terrestrial habitat into aquatic habitat. That's part of it. We will be creating additional habitat for bald eagles that we already have under management at Rollins. Please don't bother them. We have yellow-legged frog. This expands their habitat roughly from marginal 3 miles to 32.5 miles. And then habitat and refugia for those species that are living on Rollins that can't be on Rollins during the weekend when everybody's high-speed boating. Loss of recreation. We will have recreation on both Placer and Nevada County sides. We'll have trails, no-wake boating and fishing, bird watching facilities with easy access to both sides. This image, this is the day use area at Placer, and then some other slides. Yuba River impacts. The reservoir cannot store, this is one of the things that people are believing, the reservoir cannot store Yuba River water. It can only store Bear River water. Over the past few years, the only reason that Yubas have had water in them during the drought is because of those reservoirs. And then utilizing the Bear will provide greater drought security for environmental flows on the Yuba. If we're pulling water on the Bear, it means that we don't have to pull water on the Yuba to supply our customers. Thank you very much. Whew! Dude, it's fast.
Thank you, Ram. That was very informative. Now, Caleb Dardick, would you please come forward and tell us about your perspective? Thank you.
All right. Should I get a few extra minutes? All right, can you hear me okay? There are a few extra seats over there, or pretty much full? All right. Got one extra seat, some here, one extra here, two extra here. Anybody else? 3 extra seats? Why don't we try to get everyone seated? All right, are we good, Whitney? Is the top of that lost? Give Whitney a chance to, there you go, thank you. Good morning. It's great to see all of you here and to also see that so many NID board members are here. I saw Director Wilcox, Director Borbeck. Thought I saw another board member as well. There you are, Director Weber's who I saw first. Hi, Nancy. All right, so it's a pleasure to be here, and I do want to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me here. I especially commend the League's commitment to encouraging informed and active participation in local government. That is a core value of the South Yuba River Citizens League as well. Over the past year, I have enjoyed working with League members, Helen Williamson right here in the front, and Joanne Marie, We worked together last year to send a request, Circle, the League of Women Voters, the Federation of Neighborhood Associations, to NID. And we made a simple request. We asked them to broadcast their meetings live on the internet and to archive them as well. And we thought that NID would welcome our suggestion on how they could be more open and transparent to the public. I guess we were wrong. It's deeply troubling that last Wednesday, the NID board voted 4-1 to oppose this affordable, good government action that would have made NID's actions transparent to interested citizens who are unable to attend in person due to work commitments, health, or disability. At least we have meetings like this, where we can come together and address critical issues about water policy, such as NID's proposal to build Centennial Dam. When word first started getting out about NID's plans to build a major new dam on the Bear River, people were very surprised. Most folks hadn't heard that NID planned to build a 275-foot tall dam. They hadn't heard how it would inundate the last 6 miles of publicly accessible, free-flowing river on the Bear. They didn't know that it would displace dozens of families, destroy beloved swimming holes, and Native American cultural sites. And it's wonderful to see Tribal Secretary of the Nisenan, Shelley Cobert, here. Welcome. Most people living in the Yuba River watershed had no idea either that more than half of the water in the upper and middle South Yuba River watersheds is already diverted to the Bear River. And when I shared this actually in the other room just last year, it was about 250 people there for State of the Yuba, there was this gasp in the audience because I don't think people fully understand how water is managed and where it comes from and how it moves. When NID told us, what NID told us is that they need Centennial Dam, and I think Rem has done a great job laying it out for all of us today. Quote, to provide drought and climate change mitigations, meet projected future water supply needs, and improve supply reliability for NID's customers, end quote. The general manager broke it down for me, just like he broke it down well for you today, in terms that, even I, as a non-water policy wonk, and it's great to be surrounded by so many in this room, but, I finally got it. NID's system relies on snowmelt, and the snowpack is disappearing due to climate change. Okay, I got that. I think we all get that. NID wants to build a mid-elevation dam to store about 110,000 acre-feet of water during flash rainstorms. I get it. I can visualize that. A big bucket of water, a big bucket to catch the rain, because climate change is happening, and I can call it climate change. I think most of us can and should. And we need to be ready for an uncertain future, and we need to be ready for any future. But I agree, I applaud NID for planning for our future. That is their job, and they do a wonderful job. That's the conversation we're all engaged in, is the best way to plan for that future, now more uncertain than ever. Back to climate change. We know that climate scientists have been predicting for many years that the future will be one of extremes, and we are living it now, aren't we? What makes Centennial Dam particularly unique, what makes this proposal really interesting for so many of us, is that it is the first time that a water agency has used climate change as an argument for a new dam in California. But climate models are showing more and more uncertainty, leaving some of us to wonder how often Centennial Dam will even fill. Professor Jay Lund, who's a water expert at UC Davis, says, quote, this year, there's more water than reservoirs. But if you can only fill them every 10 years, they make less sense economically, end quote. Might Centennial be empty for years at a time? We've certainly seen plenty of dry reservoirs over the past 5 years. And if floods follow drought, what are the risks to downstream populations from Centennial Dam? Oroville Dam was built less than 50 years ago, and nearly 200,000 people had to flee for their lives. Will Centennial Dam be able to handle these new superfloods? In 2005, many of you probably saw this in the papers, Circle joined with the Sierra Club, and Alan Eberhard is here. He was part of that effort back then. Thank you, Alan. And Friends of the River to raise the red flag about the safety deficiencies of Oroville Dam's backup spillway. Turns out we were right to be concerned then, and maybe we're right to be concerned now. Dams were historically designed for stable, predictable weather patterns. Maybe dams aren't the best fit for the extreme, uncertain future we are facing. One of the lessons from Oroville may be the need for spending money on maintenance rather than new building. In addition to mitigating climate change, the new dam is supposed to, quote, meet projected future water supply needs, end quote. But NID has not spelled out what the project need really is. Rather than provide for current NID residential customers, most of whom live at an elevation higher than the dam site and won't be served by it, the new water storage may instead facilitate more residential sprawl, including as many as 20,000 homes that'll be constructed in Lincoln within NID's service area. And it's not that growth is wrong, it's the type of growth and the smart growth.
Excuse me, please. I know people have strong feelings on this, but I think Caleb deserves a quiet, respectful reception from us, just as we gave to Rem. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. You know, both my mother and my brother's family live in Lincoln, so to Director Morbeck, who represents them, this is not about playing favorites. This is just about thinking about how we plan and how we develop in our state. This is an issue we are facing statewide, if not nationwide. But NID needs to be much more forthcoming about their growth projections. Who's the water for, and where will they live? Studies have shown that reservoir financing plans often rely on inflated population growth projections. We think this may be the case here. But building the dam may encourage more unsustainable, sprawling developments and more traffic headed our way. Most Circle members live in the Yuba watershed, so they want to know what's at risk for the Yuba River. And that circle shows the upper, middle, and south. As I mentioned, more than half of the water in the upper, middle, and south Yuba River watersheds is already diverted to the Bear River. Circle is concerned that Centennial Dam, if built, could demand even more Yuba River water, especially, because I get that it isn't, now planned that way, but especially if dry years leave the new reservoir low. I can't even imagine a room big enough to contain the outrage if NID planned to build a dam on the Yuba River. And it turns out that people on the Bear River are as fiercely loyal and proud of the Bear as those of us who live on the Yuba are. I've been down there now. It's a beautiful place to swim. It's a beautiful place to fish and camp. In fact, was down at the Bear River Campground. It's packed. People take reservations out a year in advance. On the day it opens, it's all reserved up. And it's a beloved place for the local folks, who live in Colfax, which not incidentally really is a low-income community and needs to have free recreation areas. So even though this dam is not yet approved and the environmental impact analysis is only just started, NID is buying up properties in the dam's path. 25 homes and another 120 parcels are on their shopping lists. And guess what? not everyone is ready to sell. So NID will need to use their powers of eminent domain to clear them out. At a recent NID meeting, a young man, Sean Dooley, got up and he spoke to the board, and he talked about growing up on the Bear. And it was obvious how precious those memories were to him and his family. This has been an interesting thing to learn, too. Many of the people who live in the areas immediately surrounding this part of the Bear, where Centennial would be built, are outside the NID district. That means they have no one on the NID board representing their interest. Some Bear watershed residents are crying out, "No inundation without representation." It's catchy. Folks are being forced, though, seriously, to defend themselves, to defend their homes, long before the project is even approved. What happens to their property values? Does that sound right to you? NID doesn't want anyone in their way, and they are moving very, very quickly to even evict the federal government. BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, you can see their properties up there in yellow around the circle. They own land that would be inundated too. But even though BLM has no objections to the dam coming in, and NID can legally inundate federal property, NID has enlisted Congressman Doug LaMalfa to pass a bill transferring these federal lands to NID. When the BLM representative asked NID staff at the September 2015 board meeting why the district needs to purchase these parcels, the general manager stated, quote, "Purchasing these lands would be good business for the district," end quote. This unnecessary land grab is an end run around the long-standing agreements painfully negotiated over the past 7 years to protect fish and wildlife and in-stream flows. And there are a number of people here who have dedicated, Bob Center, Alan Eberhardt, many others in this room, who have dedicated years and years to going to these FERC meetings. This isn't the only end run by NID. They also seem to be trying to evade dealing with FERC, which I just mentioned, which stands for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which oversees hydroelectric dams. In 2014, NID said the Centennial Dam project included plans for hydroelectric energy generation, which would help generate the revenue to pay for the new facility. In May 2016, the general manager told Placer County Water Agency, quote, "NID plans on adding a second Rollins powerhouse and then putting in 30-plus megawatts of hydropower at a later date at Centennial Reservoir," end quote. But just last week, NID's board president said there won't be any, quote, "power plants as part of the Centennial project," end quote. Now, when asked about the turnabout, we now hear is that maybe someday NID would build some small hydro at Centennial, but not so much as to fall under FERC guidelines. I think we need to call that out. If NID stripped the current proposal of its hydroelectric component so they can get through the state and federal environmental review process without FERC and without including any analysis of flows for hydro production, they may be breaking the law. If true, this would be an example of project segmenting, also called piecemealing, and that's illegal too under both state and federal environmental law. One thing we do know is that any hydropower that could qualify for a FERC exemption, small, isn't going to be of significant help in generating revenue. So to recap, this project proposes to flood people's homes and recreational areas, seize public lands to remove federal protections for fish and wildlife, and on top of that, continue the tragic pattern of literally erasing Native American history and culture. The Bear River serves as the territorial divide for 3 different Nisenan tribal entities who still use this cultural landscape for spiritual and ceremonial purposes. According to the NID staff report, the proposed dam site would completely inundate 140 archaeological sites. We understand that may include 20 Native American village sites and 3 to 4 burial sites. And yet the general manager was quoted in the Union as saying, quote, "There aren't Native American burial grounds out there," end quote. Shelley? Yeah. Okay, so for those of you who pride yourselves as being fiscally conservative, and I count myself among that, take note. When NID first announced Centennial in 2014, the price tag was $160 million. For the year or so after that, their website, centennialreservoir.org, said the cost would be $200 to $300 million. This year, the NID board president conceded, quote, "The project is likely to cost close to $500 million," end quote, and another director said he wouldn't be surprised if the dam did end up costing over $1 billion, which is pretty close to the $1.2 billion that our experts have estimated. And when I say our, I mean the Foothill Waters Network. We are so lucky to be part of this large coalition of local and state and regional environmental organizations that have a tremendous breadth of experience working on water issues. It's probably hundreds of years of experience if you put it all together. But even going from $160 to $500 million is a big increase in only 2 years, don't you think? And if NID borrows money for the dam, the interest payments alone could add several hundred millions more over time. The board president has assured us, he said the project must pencil out if it's to go forward. He's also said, quote, "The project will not be put on the taxpayers or ratepayers. The facility will be built and paid for by the revenues generated by the project," end quote. So will it pencil out? American Rivers, and Jeff Odefe's here from American Rivers. Thank you for your help. There you are. Put out a study about the high cost of dams called the Money Pit, and that's online. Suggest you take a look at it. One of the quotes, though, I want to share is they caution that a, quote, "high price, high risk water supply reservoir strategy can leave a community financially vulnerable, tying up assets and leaving taxpayers and ratepayers on the hook without a guarantee that the water will be there when they need it," end quote. And while the cost estimates keep climbing, we still haven't heard definitively from NID how they plan to pay for Centennial. And I'm pleased to hear Rem say that we will be getting that information as part of the environmental review process. But will hydropower revenue pay for it? Well, there's no longer plans to put hydro on Centennial anymore. Will NID be eligible for taxpayer-funded water bond money? Conventional wisdom, different than what you just heard, is that Sites Reservoir is the one that's first in line for that money. Even if NID did get Centennial into the line, they may not be eligible for it. The general manager suggested that NID has a big investor lined up to loan them the money. But can NID's ratepayers afford to be severely burdened with debt, especially if that debt is held by a major real estate developer? If we're going to learn whether this dam pencils out or not, we'll need to know the real cost and who pays. You come away from this feeling so much uncertainty, and a certain amount of uncertainty is appropriate given the magnitude of the issues we're trying to deal with. But some of the uncertainties, they start stacking up, like starting with the uncertainty about even the need for the dam. What is the real basis for the stated need of 110,000 acre-feet of water? Uncertainty about climate change projections. How often will the dam even fill up? Uncertainty about the cost and who's going to pay for it. Are we in for $500 million or double that? So is a new dam the best way to prepare for all that uncertainty? Maybe there's a better, more certain way forward without a dam. Experts at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, much under assault today and worthy of our defense. These experts, guided by the best practices of water agencies across the nation, say that building a new dam should be the last option considered, not the first. See some agreement there. The EPA recognized that reservoirs are the first choice for those who want a quick fix. but it may not be the best choice. They say we should put efficiency first. It's much cheaper than dam building. And American Rivers reports that per gallon, dams cost thousands of times more than water efficiency investments. NID Board President Nick Wilcox promised that NID would study alternatives to the dam, and I thank you for that commitment. While we think that, he also told the union that, quote, if someone could show him an alternative that would provide 110,000 acre-feet of water, he'd examine it, end quote. While we think the jury is still out on the 110,000 acre-foot number, I am intrigued by Wilcox's comment and challenge. He added that, quote, fixing leaks in the district's ditch system is a goal that would bring less than a third of what Centennial Reservoir would bring, unquote. But listen closely. Less than a third of what Centennial is expected to hold is a lot of water. And there are other fixes, and aren't there other fixes we should be thinking about too? So, what if we made a back-of-the-envelope calculation, just a quick one? And please keep in mind that these are very, very rough estimates that would need to be studied thoroughly by people much smarter than myself. But what if NID fixed its leaky pipes and canals? And we heard that that is on the menu. Experts say that could save 10% system-wide, amounting to 12,000 or more acre-feet. What if NID raised the dam at Rollins Reservoir? Some say that would make space for 12 to 25,000 acre-feet. What if, I think I mixed these two up. What if NID raised the dam at Rollins? That's 5 to 35,000 apparently. What if NID removed the sediment behind Rollins? Some say that could make space for 12,000 to 25,000 acre-feet. Now we also know that dams lose tons of water to evaporation, right? So some predict Centennial could lose 5,000 acre-feet. We need to count that in too when we're thinking about this. Improving forest health and restoring meadows, very dear to Circle's work. If we did that in the Bear watershed, we could create at least 2,000 acre-feet of clean water, and some optimists say it could be 10 times that amount, maybe even 20,000 acre-feet. That would be amazing if our forests and meadows were that healthy once again. But our biggest water user in our community, and wonderful use of water, appropriate, is our farmers. But what if NID used some of this hundreds of millions of dollars to incentivize farmers and landscapers to minimize water waste? Farmers, we know that farmers who have converted to drip irrigation save water and money and increase productivity as much as 17 to 22%, according to the Pacific Institute. What if NID adopted best practices around pricing and metering water? Experts say water needs to cost enough to cover cost and encourage efficiency. And what if NID's residential customers like me made conservation a way of life? If we reduced our average daily use of 246 gallons by 35%, that'd still be about 160 gallons per day, which is about 3 times what is considered necessary. But did I get that right? Kinda. All right, by these back-of-the-envelope calculations, and all of the above approach would provide NID with somewhere between 47,000 to 108,000 acre-feet without a new dam. And that doesn't even take into account even more innovative practices. Alicia, or someone came up to me earlier and said, we're going to talk about groundwater. People are very excited about groundwater storage. We need to be talking about that, especially in the Lincoln area. We need to be talking about retrofitting our old buildings and building smart, reusing gray water, installing low-flow toilets, and so many other proven measures. There are literally dozens and dozens of other alternative conservation and efficiency strategies to consider to conserve water at our farms and our businesses and at our homes. It seems that in seeking to build a dam as a first option and not the last, NID is out of step with the innovation that this community thrives on. Where's NID's leadership if conservation and efficiency isn't considered first? Am I the only one who found it disconcerting last year that when Governor Brown called on Californians to reduce water use, the general manager publicly complained that NID customers were saving too much. He even suggested it was hurting the bottom line. And he's nodding in assent. NID's business model, and we need to think about and understand it better, this business model is out of whack with our values if saving water is bad for business. But instead of focusing on repairing their aging infrastructure or finding innovative ways to save water, they launched this non-stop PR campaign to sell us Centennial Dam. They have spent over $7.5 million developing this plan to date, including hundreds of thousands of dollars on PR alone. So, if you share these concerns, here's what you can do, especially if you are an NID ratepayer. Speak out. Ask questions. Challenge the need for the dam. Insist that alternatives be thoroughly studied and debated. And why do this? Because NID wants you to think this dam is a done deal. The NID board president has said, quote, "It's not a question of whether or not it's going to be built. To be honest with you, because believe me, it will be built at some time," end quote. And the general manager has made similar definitive statements. Well, we know that NID has been trying to build this dam since the 1920s, and it's still not a done deal, even though they're now using climate change as their best argument for it. But keep up, folks. NID is moving very fast, buying property before the environmental review is complete, before they even have an approved project, getting Congress to turn over public lands to them, and doing all of this before the public has even had a chance to be heard. So we will have to be, and I'm looking at all of you, to be increasingly vigilant and engaged to keep up. I invite you to come to our Centennial Dam Activist Summit this Monday, March 13th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Nevada Theater in Nevada City to learn more about the project and how you can participate. And I strongly encourage you to become a dam watchdog. That's my puppy, Roxy. Together we can learn more and challenge this project. So sign up today. It's the best way to get information directly from Circle, damwatchdog.org. Thank you, and thank you, League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County.
Our first question is, how will the dam impact my water supply? We depend on water from our well at Dog Bar and Magnolia. The dam will limit my escape in the event of a fire. Will a new route be opened? Who would like to address that first?
Well, I guess it's mostly me.
And if you want to,
Okay.
you're welcome to stand over here.
Okay.
Yes, that would be
Who would prefer that? I'd prefer to sit. But all right. Then I'll sit. So the answer, this is kind of can I have the card? Because there's a lot to this one. Okay. How will it impact my water supply? We depend on water from our well. So as everybody in this room that has a well, myself included, knows that I could drill a well where I'm sitting right here, and Richard could drill a well where he's sitting over there, and we could have completely different well performance, even at the same depth and same structure. So I can't really answer that one specifically because each well is unique in its own behavior and its own characteristic. How will limit my escape? Actually, this will help your escape. Because as part of the project, we have a new bridge that will replace the Dog Bar Bridge, which I drove in December on a rainy night trying to get to Meta Vista, and I don't know anybody that uses that bridge. That thing's unsafe. It's just so we're going to put a new bridge across from the Parker side to the other side where NID also owns property, and then come out just about 1,500 feet down the road from Placer Hills Road. So it'll be faster. It'll be a 35-mile-an-hour straight shot. I think that's all of it.
Thanks.
Yep.
It was interesting when I went to the first scoping meeting in Grass Valley at March of last year. Is that when it was? Yeah, it's starting to roll together. And, we sit at Circle and we're so focused on water and rivers, and we heard 25 people get up and speak, and what many of them talked about was safety, transportation, traffic, access, what happens in a fire. This is a rural part of the community. People, some people may like their old-fashioned bridge. I know for me, growing up on the ridge, I really miss the old, going slow over the old bridge and going over this fast new bridge. So, these are changes. There's a lot of impacts. Both Placer County Board of Supervisors and the Nevada County Board of Supervisors will have oversight and approvals as part of road construction and bridge construction. So that's, again, another audience of elected officials that we will need to engage with.
Our next question is, for both of our speakers, Earth temperature will increase by 4 degrees Fahrenheit due to climate change by the time the dam is finished. What impact will this have on your analysis? Caleb, would you like to take that one first?
Go ahead. What your thoughts are on four?
Yeah, my thoughts on climate change is we're in big trouble.
Wait a minute. All right, so fair enough. So the models that we're running right now are utilizing kind of the best practices that we have with regards to climate change, and so they are predicting kind of a similar bandwidth, and they're looking for that in those out years. As we're running, the models right now are running from current all the way through 2032. As part of the hydraulic modeling, and as soon as we've got all that buttoned down with our engineers, with that information is going to become available.
How many times since 1960 have the dams below and above the proposed location of Centennial spilled over? If those dams aren't currently regularly spilling, why would Centennial be expected to fill and stay full?
Do you have an answer?
I don't. I'll go take a share.
All right, so our reservoirs routinely spill even in drought years. Last year, in 2015 to 2016, from December to April, Rollins spilled 220,000 acre feet. We know that the system has ample water in it all the way through to dry and critical dry. So there is water there. And there is water in the Yuba systems as well as Deer Creek. So there's water in the system.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are asking these questions and are not persuaded that there's enough water, and are also concerned about downstream users. So if you're putting up a new wall stopping water, what's the impact downstream at Campfire West? What's the impact on the Delta? What's the impact, in a much larger scale? So I think this area of hydrology is probably one of the most critical questions, and we have been waiting that data, which I thought we were going to see in January. But that's going to be an important part for the community to really study the hydrology data and ask those hard questions about, will it fill? When will it fill? Where will the water come from? And what happens downstream?
Why would NID invest in purchasing properties before the project is approved by various agencies and the funding is in place? Would these properties serve any purpose if Centennial was not built?
Yeah, thanks, buddy. So to date, NID has only engaged in willing seller, willing buyer transfers. So that is any member of the public that's in the project area that would like to sell their property to NID, contacts NID, and we appraise the property and we go through the transaction. These properties are important to the district as not only part of this project, but should the project be delayed or whatever, these watershed resources are very important to Combi and to the downstream system. So having more ability to be involved in the management of those properties is very, very important to us. I mean, Caleb already talked about watershed health. I don't know if anybody's been over to see the King Fire and the damage that that fire did, but Placer County Water Agency is really reeling from the amount of material that's coming off of those slopes and the damage that was done to its watersheds. These watersheds are very, very, very important. I can't emphasize that anymore. So the joke, or the thought process is you ask the kid where the milk comes from, and the kid says, well, it comes from a supermarket. And we all, it comes from a cow. Where does water come from? It doesn't come from a stream or a creek. That's just the collection device. It comes from a watershed. And it is critical that we manage these watersheds. They are the source of life for the system. So those properties are important to us. And so if somebody would like to sell them, NID would like to buy them. Thank you.
I think what's been interesting meeting just a few of the property owners so far is what a cloud of uncertainty is hanging over their lives now. And once this announcement went in, their lives changed basically forever, because now they have to decide whether to sell, whether to fight, whether to stay. One gentleman said to me the other day, I was planning on building a new fence. Is that pointless now? And I just can't imagine, that level of uncertainty now. What is that going to do to future property values? This is going to have to be disclosed by realtors forever. And are these folks going to get paid fairly? What leverage do they really have now? So I think, what I'm hearing is a great deal of concern, again, from folks, who's up until this happened, their lives, they were living in a beautiful place. And now they have to ask these really tough questions.
The next question is, years ago, San Francisco canceled all building permits because of limited sewage capacity or capability. Can we cancel building permits in parts of California because of limited water?
It's a great question, and I don't know the answers. I've certainly heard people talk about this issue quite a bit. What is the linkage between development approvals, master plans approvals, and water? And it doesn't seem that we are thinking as smart as we could or as holistically as we could. We tend to look at things in sort of project by project as they're proposed by developers, and not really looking holistically at what's best for California. But again, as I said earlier, this is a California issue, but one of the areas where we can address this as a community is with our planning commissions and with our Board of Supervisors who make planning decisions. So Nevada County Board of Supervisors, Placer County Board of Supervisors, here we are today in Nevada County. We need to be in Placer County too, and very engaged with those communities, because this is a question for them. What do they want? And do they understand where the water is coming from, and how confident are they?
Right. So I completely agree with Caleb. Right. The question is a land use plan. It's a planning thing. So it's general plans need to be more cognizant and more informed about the resources that these communities are drawing on. NID's job is to bring water to people that the land use agencies are letting on the ground. And so at some point we reached, and I showed you the table out of the Urban Water Management Plan, at some point we reach zero. And when a development happens or when somebody proposes something, if the water's not there, they don't get to build. And I know this is happening like in Rio Linda. There are a number of proposed developments. There's no water supply in Rio Linda. They're not developing. That's it, period. So, they're out there scrambling to try to find water.
Yeah, I think one of the questions, both on the water agency side and also on the planning side is what are we telling each other about what's really coming? And are we thinking about efficiency in retrofitting our old buildings, but as well as planning for the future? Are we going to continue to have lawns in deserts? Is this really the best use of limited water? And just the way we're building, we continue, I don't think that the development patterns that we're seeing out of Sacramento that keep moving towards us are very enlightened, or certainly the best practices in terms of smart building architecture, so much of which is well known. So again, this is an area as a community and as counties we really need to stepping up our game.
Next question. Could you please talk about what mitigation efforts would be made for the Nisenan cultural sites and burials that would be flooded?
Okay, so first let me have a personal moment here. My family moved to New Mexico in the 30s to be with tribes. I have cousins that are Navajos. The Native American issues are very important to me, first. Second, as part of this process, and Shelley's here, NID from the very beginning as part of the AB 52 requirement has been working with United Auburn Indian community from the get-go. We are very, very sensitive to this, and by law are not allowed to discuss it. So these assets, it's very important to us that we protect these assets. We know that when we talk about these assets, that people will go out and try to find them and abuse them. So right now, please be assured that we are working with UAIC, and if the other two bands, Nevada City and Colfax, would like to engage with them, the way to do, or engage with us, Shelley, is to work through United Auburn Indian Community, okay? They also have the ability to work through the CEQA process, but it's very important. And so protecting these assets and being able to catalog them and all of the things that we need to do, we're taking care of that. I know that there's something that everybody in this room, with one exception, won't be able to see. You won't see our plan. You won't know where they are. We won't even tell you what they are, okay? That's all protected under an agreement with United Auburn Indian Community and the laws that surround these sites. So I'm sorry, I can't really give you anything more than that. I can't answer the question, that's the problem.
Caleb, do you want to comment further?
I just appreciate what Rem said and his commitment to work on these issues, because we know that they are sensitive and need to be addressed. And as Shelley has pointed out, if Native Americans had left a legacy like you see in Rome or some other place, big temples and buildings, the answers would be clear. And we need to respect what is there in the same way that we would respect more visible, ancient civilizations, which importantly, just like the Romans, live and well, Nisenan, live and well.
Next question. How much will my NID bill increase? To cover the cost of this dam, will my tax bill increase?
Okay, so I thought I covered this. Your tax bill will not increase as a result of the project. Rates, that's something that the financial feasibility process will yield out, but I can assure the members of this room that rates are our last reinforcing revenue stream for the project.
Is that the same as no? Didn't sound like that.
No, it's not a no.
Yeah.
I can't say no, I can't say yes.
I think that's an important thing that we just heard, because we have been told at different points more definitively a ratepayer won't pay, and we don't know. And that speaks to the uncertainty that I raised earlier.
The next question is it true that the Bear River watershed contains very little snowpack? So the water that NID hopes to capture is actually coming out of the Yuba watershed.
I keep being the first. That's not fair. All right, so the Bear River system is almost exclusively rain-driven. The average annual contribution right now in the model is, and this is an ish number, please, well, I'm going to be quoted. The ish number is about 264,000 acre feet in surplus. The Yuba system is not part of the water rights filing for this reservoir. Yuba water may not be diverted and stored. If you read the permit, you'll see that it says to redivert as part of the project. That's a requirement of the license, meaning that when we move water through a system, every time it touches a facility, meaning a powerhouse or a spill or whatever, it has to have a rediversion coordinate. But no Yuba right now, and Caleb's point, right now, no Yuba water is being called on as part of this project.
Any comment?
You want to read that question again?
Yes. Is it true that the Bear River watershed contains very little snowpack, so the water that NID hopes to capture is actually coming out of the Yuba watershed?
I think for us, this is the question of, it's this uncertainty once again, which, Rem is really, I appreciate his candor. The current application is for it not to be. But if you build a dam and situations change and you need to fill it, where's the water going to come from? And keep in mind, I grew up on the Yuba River, and I think like so many people, we just thought it was this free-flowing, natural river. I think the most amazing thing about becoming the executive director of Circle was the level of education that I've been getting, because not only is it the most managed water system in California by many accounts, there's sewage treatment plants upstream, there's water being diverted, it is so complexly regulated already, and water moves north, it moves west, it moves east. It's just the potential to keep moving water. We started this with the gold mining era and brilliantly built ditches and flumes to knock down the mountains, and that infrastructure has been converted to bringing us water for our farms and our businesses and our homes. Brilliant reuse. But let me tell you, it's the most managed system. So we have to think about, we have a trend of managing and engineering it, and I think Centennial is yet another example of continuing to manage and engineer. And I just hope that we can start looking at some other alternatives and take it to the next level, and with efficiencies and conservation.
This next question.
Hold on, Karen. I'd like to add. So I completely agree with what Caleb's saying. I think I'd like to add to that, and that is to understand that the Middle Yuba and South Yuba and Canyon Creek were only viable habitats because of the reservoirs that are upstream over the drought period. Caleb and his crew know that the water that we're delivering out of those dams keeps those rivers from running dry annually. Okay? So the salmon and the frogs and the turtles and the people are all benefiting from these systems. Okay, so it isn't just the urban collection, there is an environmental collection. And again, kudos to Caleb and the other peer organizations. They have done a fantastic job in the FERC relicensing to ensure that those assets are protected for the environment. They have done a great job. The conversation, though, around Yuba is very intense. We spent 4 years trying to figure out what flows we put in the system and what's getting protected. Are we protecting frogs? Are we protecting salmon? You can't have both. But it is highly managed, and it is for the benefit of more than just people.
Well, speaking of benefits to people, what recreation opportunities will NID incorporate into the Centennial Reservoir should it be constructed?
Fair. I really had to blow through that slide. I'm sorry. Right now, the lake is proposed as no wake, so it's fishing, paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing. The Parker Ranch side, so the Nevada County side, will have a facility very similar to Scotts Flat in our thought process. So a marina, day use camping or day use, tent camping, RV camping. We also understand that Southern Nevada County wants more recreation kind of amenities. So we're looking at trying to figure out how to put a hall there or someplace where people could have much larger events. We will have a trail system there on Parker Ranch. Placer County was also very focused on ensuring that there be recreation on the Placer County side. And so where the bridge currently crosses to the Placer County side, there's a day use area proposed there, which will have picnic areas, a hand launch, and other small amenities, and then a trail so that you'll be able to come across the bridge onto the Parker Ranch side and utilize the trail system there. We know that there are requests for opportunities further up on the reservoir, both on the Placer and Nevada County side, and so we're looking for how to develop those for folks. We're also working with Colfax now to try to understand how Rollins affects Colfax's economy, and then at some point maybe marry Centennial into that concept and potentially use Colfax as the gateway to both of these recreation opportunities. So really, if you've been to Rollins just without the high-speed boats, if you go to Scotts Flat without those boats as well. So.
Yeah, thank you for the question about recreation. I saw Vince Huey in the back, and he and Dennis Berry and others were very young men who loved the Yuba River. And one of the arguments for damming the South Yuba River was that it had no recreational value. We laugh, right? But yeah, it had no recreational value according to the dam proponents. And so Dennis Berry, many of you may have seen it. It's this beautiful hand-drawn map of the South Yuba River from Edwards all the way down to 49. And it shows every rock and hole and how they were named and loved and how the water moved. Because the recreational values of a river are quite distinct from the recreational values of a reservoir. And this is nothing against reservoirs and boats and fishing. Plenty of people love that. I enjoy that as well. But they're completely different, and it's a major sacrifice of river for that. And it was interesting too, again, I was going through the other day, going through my father's old files, and he had this Union article folded in half, and it was folded so you could read an article about the beginning of the disability rights movement in Nevada County. But when I unfolded it, it was this artist's rendering in the Union from 1983 that shows this gorgeous reservoir at Miners, where Miners Tunnel is, and with access points and boat ramps. And it talked in glowing terms of boat ramps and recreation and swimming and how incredible, wonderful that would be. And at that time, there was very little political support to oppose the dam project. But today, I have spoken to nearly every county supervisor, and many of them, in fact, one very more conservative member said to me, Caleb, I was for the dam 30 years ago. I wouldn't be today.
Why isn't NID collaborating with our local watershed professionals in preparing for the future of our watershed? And then noted under that question is Circle, Sierra Streams Institute, Foothill Water Networks, Wolf Creek Community Alliance, and Bear River Watershed Group.
Well, I'd like to start with that one and really commend NID. I think it's very important that we are focusing on a point that has serious controversy, and I don't want to diminish that in any way. But we live here, and NID is our water agency, and we are collaborating and working together on many issues for many years, and I fully hope to collaborate and work closely for many years to come. NID is one of our most generous sponsors of our youth education program, the school assembly program on water conservation, and I know that NID partners closely with the Sierra Fund, Sierra Streams Institute, many others. We must not lose sight in this discussion that we are neighbors, that we are friends, and that we are committed to the health and future. We do work well together. We will continue to work well together. And I do appreciate that question, though, because I think that there is a huge body of knowledge in our community on hydrology, on issues related to this dam and this proposal that is not being tapped as fully as it should be. And I hope NID will take that question in the spirit that I believe it was offered. But let's not have any confusion about how we see our relationship now and in the future. So
to just echo that, clearly working with our local proponents and our project partners, it's important. While so NID is a local organization. We are the community or parts therein. So working with Circle on issues, right now we house the Wolf Creek Alliance on our facility. We provide them a space to work. We sample for them, and we work with them. We support them through one of the things that we all are working on is CABI. So the Cosumnes American Bear Yuba River IRWMP, the Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. Circle is putting a lot of time in that. Sierra Fund's put a lot of time in that. NID has taken direction. So we're trying to lead the charge. We're working with Plumas Corp. We're working with Sierra Nevada Conservancy. We're working with CAFWA, the California, it's a fire alliance group, to start working on headwaters issues both at the state level and at the federal level. And the only way that we can do that, everybody, is if we have our local partners with us. If NID stands up alone, she's only alone, right? We need the community to be with us and to have a common understanding of these watersheds. The state of California and the federal government don't recognize, don't understand, have limited understanding and therefore limited value understanding of the headwaters here in the Sierras. And it bothers me greatly down when I'm in Sacramento is trying to communicate to them 2/3 of the water in this state of California comes from the Sierras. 2/3, okay? That's a big number. And protecting the watersheds is a much bigger job than NID can do. And we need Circle, and we need Sierra Streams Institute, and we need all of these various organizations to work with us so that we can protect these assets. Because the 207 employees that we have at NID, we can't do it all. And I only have one watershed planner, and I have one superintendent of water resources. So we're limited, and really being able to look to Caleb's organization and the others to support us, to help us to work together to develop policy, to develop advocacy, and to develop real science. Real science is critical here so that we can make a point when he and I are in Sacramento advocating, one, for money, but also for protection. So we are working with these groups. We will continue to work with these groups regardless, absolutely regardless, regardless of what happens on the project, okay? So we're not gonna stop.
Next question. Why hasn't NID dredged its existing reservoirs during times of drought?
Okay, so that's crazy expensive, that's fine, but it's got a class 3 contaminant in it, and that is mercury. So you can't just mine it up out of the reservoir and lay it on the ground. It's supposed to, at that point, it has to go to a class 3 landfill, which the nearest one, anyone? Kettleman Hills. So we would be talking about dredging the material out of the reservoir and hauling it to Kettleman Hills to lay on the ground, which is why having this machine, having the mercury machine is really, really, really important, because then we can start to remove this material. The trick then, and this is what we're doing right now, is to find the market. Who wants it, right? So, if you're on Rollins, you have the Steep Hollow side and you have the Greenhorn side. The Steep Hollow side, that can get to 80 really easily and as actually marketable material. And isn't it, I think, it's a really great environmental opportunity, because then you're not quarrying the material, you're not ripping the land apart to develop something, you're taking material out of a reservoir and you're using it for a purpose. Awesome. The Greenhorn side is more difficult. You have to truck it further, the demand's not there, some of the material isn't fantastic. So right now, NID is looking at which mines, because there's 5 big mines on the Greenhorn side, which mines can take the material? Why shouldn't we be able to take the material out of the reservoir and put it back into the mines that it came from? And so we're working with the state and the mining organizations to try to figure out how to take that material out, plop it into the mine, and treat it and use mining, so they have a fee. There's a bonded fee that the state collects, and we can use some of those funds to try to start moving the material out of our reservoirs and putting it back into the mines where it came from. So we're doing those things, but these are big lifts for the district, and we started in 2013. We now have a sediment control program that started this year. We're funding that program. So we're moving in that direction. We recognize that this is an untapped source, and we need to go after it for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Rem. And I appreciate seeing the slide that sort of lists all of the different, activities that you're engaged in, many of which I was suggesting in the presentation. I think the question, we gave a talk on alternatives at the film festival, and you came up to me afterwards and said, hey, we're doing all that stuff. And I think the question the community needs to be asking NID is to what extent, and at what level of investment, and what are the trade-offs. And again, this is what we're really hoping to see from a real alternatives analysis. For those of you who've worked on planning projects and been involved with CEQA and NEPA, just generally, the alternatives tend to be a joke, because the project proponent wants their project to be the best project, and they don't necessarily get the consultant to come up with a real, viable, true alternative. I have been so pleased and reassured by both Rem and Director Wilcox that won't be the case here, that the alternatives will be thorough and comprehensive and will really give the community some real choices and an understanding of the complexity of these issues, as well as the scale and cost. And I think we need to be engaged, not just today, but regularly, and become with some expertise, because there's unintended consequences to every solution. And they need to be looked at holistically and creatively, You tend to get people dismissing an alternative because, dredging is too expensive and it's full of toxics, we can't do it. Or we can't line and ditch, we can't line the canal or pipe because then all these wetlands would dry up. You can't have an all or nothing view of each of the alternatives. Each of them need to be thought, well, to what degree could you minimize impact and get maximum gain? There's a level of complexity that we're being asked to engage in, which is what the NID staff and board are doing. We need to be part of that, because we can make a list of everything we want, but we need to understand it. And he can say, we're doing all these things, but we need to be asking to what extent, at what cost, on what time frame, and for what end. This all comes down to us understanding what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that issue of the goal is what keeps coming back for me. What is the need? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Because when I first heard someone say this the other day, I thought they were being kind of irreverent. They said, we've just come through 5 years of drought fine. With the implication being we don't need a dam, right? We've come through it fine. Everyone got a shower. Our agriculture, the trees got watered, the cows got fed. So I find that really intriguing. The more you think about it, it's like, oh, so are we chasing, are we trying to find a solution to a problem that we don't have? Or is there a reasonable growth that we could agree on down the line that we haven't solved for? So these are the questions I think we have to ask is, what is the need? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And then is this menu all of the above with addressing the complexity of each? Are we up for it, or are we going to go for the sort of tried and true, well-known, put a bucket in the river?
We have time for 2 more brief responses to these questions. If this project is not about expansion, why has NID promised this water to new developments in the Lincoln area or Loomis?
So I can equivocally say that this water has not been promised to Loomis or to Lincoln. In 2005, NID's board allocated a block of water for the development within Lincoln. That water's already spoken for and it's already booked. So this isn't about anybody additionally coming onto the system.
Our last question, unless you want to respond to that, Caleb, is who ultimately makes the decision to build the dam?
Sorry, guys. There's 3 of them here in this room right now. It'll be a 5-member board. That's it.
I think that's the most important question here. You are citizens. You are at a League of Women Voters event and meeting about citizenship and engagement. And we just watched the most historic disinvestment from our citizenship any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. Let's not let it happen here. Let's be informed, educated, and active citizens. And yes, talk to Nancy, talk to Nick, talk to Will, talk to these human beings and people that we have chosen to elect us, to represent us and represent these complex water issues, because they're here to represent us on complex water issues. Let's hold them accountable to the best science.
And they're here.
And they're here in the room, and thank them. Let's applaud them for being here. Nancy, Nick, I know Will was here too. Because that's right, there's Will. Yeah, that's right. 3 votes, you get a dam. 3 votes, you don't get a dam. But more importantly, 3 votes, we have a good plan for our future.
Thank you to this audience for your excellent questions. These were really well thought out questions. And thank you again to our excellent speakers.